So mine's long, but yours might be shorter, which is fine. You're just going to rest on your forearms. What we want to do is position that pile of pillows, towels, or that bolster so that our pelvis is supported, and then our torso. That might mean that if yours is quite long, you turn your head to one side. It might mean that yours ends further back, and then you're just going to position your forearms so that your torso is supported well. And we're going to take one leg out to the side, roughly, knee somewhere in line with the hip, and then the heel below the knee. So it doesn't need to be 90-90 at each of those joints, but somewhere with a bend and a bend. And I guess a bend. Bend at the hip, at the knee, at the ankle. Okay, we can release that torso down. And then that leg that we've taken out to the side, you're going to take the pinky edge of that foot and lift it up towards the ceiling or in the direction of your head, and then lower it back down. Maybe you rest on the inner border of that foot and the knee comes off the ground. So we go into some external rotation, and then we lift that pinky edge, outside edge of the heel off, and we come into some internal rotation. Again, we're not fighting through anything, just sort of give the suggestion and see what your brain does with it. And work there. Okay, then you're going to let that leg settle, and we're going to take the other leg out as well. So we're going to have both, if I make some space there. So we'll have both legs out in this frog, supported frog pose. Okay, then we're going to straighten the one we first bent, take it out long, and the side that we've still got bent at the hip, bent at the knee, bent at the ankle. Again, we're going to take the outside edge, that pinky edge, outside edge of the heel towards the ceiling, and then bring the inside edge to the floor. Maybe the knee and thigh lift, maybe they don't. Whatever happens for you is data for your brain. More and more, it's so fascinating to me where I'll be like, I want to do this, and my brain is like, do what? It's like, and you need to give yourself a second to let things organize and figure it out. And when I do that, usually it figures it out, the best way to do it. But it's taken me a long time to learn, not just to kind of ramrod things. I did that a lot in my 20s and even 30s. Okay, let that go, and we're going to extend that leg out. So both legs are long. Come back to that first side, bend the hip, bend the knee, bend the ankle. And then hands are going to come underneath the shoulders. And again, think of those elbows, forearms pitching towards the ground. How that then rotates the upper arm bone back to peel us up off that bolster. Okay, and then we're going to pitch the elbow end of the forearm away from the floor, and we're just going to roll up and down a couple of times like that. And maybe your hands don't need to be under the shoulders. Maybe your hands need to be in front of wherever you are, kind of with the fingers and the thumb in more of like a diamond configuration. And that this gets you better leverage to kind of feel and be able to ratchet and extend each of the vertebrae of the spine. So, play with that hand position, and again that idea of the elbow end of the forearm pitching towards the ground, where your head looks, so that there's a sense of like space in your shoulders and your neck. And we're going to peel up with this leg out to the side one last time. Okay, lower down, slide and extend out that leg, and then we're going to come up on the other side. Now I've got the top of my foot on the floor, but know you could also have the toes tucked under. You could find that like MTP joint and be working with the ankle of that extended out leg bent. Some of us, that's going to give us a better sense of being able to work the upper body against the lower body to extend through the spine and through the shoulders, so, and the hips. And maybe you find that on one side that works better, and on the other side, having the top of the foot down works better. But keep feeling for like what helps make space for you to then move into space in this shape. And you might take a couple breaths there and release down and extend that leg out. We're going to roll to the side and come off of that bolster and give our pile of blankets or a bolster a turn. Any questions that work okay, Karen? You're good. Okay, awesome. Okay, so with this next one, we're taking the bolster this way. For some of us, for me, there's some things that I'm going to find this potentially too low. And so a workaround would be to take whatever it is that you're using, and you could add a couple of blocks under it to get you the height that you want, okay? So, and it might be that you like need this height on one side, but on the other hip, you don't need that height. So you might even have one block that you work with. So again, have the options available and let your system like problem solve it. I'm just giving sort of one iteration that I found works, but there's more than just the one. So we're going to move from here. We're going to step one foot over top of that support. So we're kneeling behind and in front. And then we're going to work this front leg into this 90-90. So we're going to work this front leg and slide this back leg back so that we come into this elevated pigeon. So to start with, we don't need this knee to go to the ground. We don't necessarily need this hip to also be square. So you might start more in this 90-90. You see how my back leg is turned towards you and my front leg is turned away from you, but I'm resting on that front outer hip. So then from here, I can work with starting to extend this back hip to the degree that the position that I've got my front shin in works for that front hip. So just kind of roll in and out. The other kind of way you can work with this is that front leg. If it's that front hip that is kind of where you're getting stuck or running into yourself, if I take this front shin and move it in and come onto the front of that foot, all of a sudden there's different space in that front hip, and I can get more square to the floor. Does that make sense? So it just kind of play where it's, your body is like, yeah, be there for a second and breathe. That tissue that is getting tensioned, that feels good. Don't stay in a place. This is also kind of why I like these blocks, is because I can widen them so that this front leg, I can get this foot and there's space for it. Because maybe that foot actually needs to come under the pelvis a little bit. So if you can see, the top of my foot is kind of under the bolster, but now I don't squish that foot because I've got blocks on the bolster. And now I can work that hip extension on that back leg, right? I could come down onto the forearms. That's going to work more of that front outer hip, back hip stuff. If I come up onto the hands, or when I come up onto the hands, I'm going to work a bit more of that back extended hip, which I could also then play with bringing the foot up. And again, maybe a hand reaches back. Again, let your brain decide, is it the opposite hand that reaches back, or is it the same side hand that reaches back? And then the hand and foot can kind of work into one another, and you find where you get the extension of the back hip and the work and extension through the spine that's productive for you today. Okay? Work with reaching the legs into the ground. Maybe both hands reach back. Now where it feels interesting for you. And then to finish, come down onto the forearms. Let the spine round and drape over that front leg. Let's just take 5 breaths here. Okay, and then unthread that front leg. I just kind of sit on the bolster and then I'll flip the direction that I'm going. Any questions about that before we go to the other side? Did you find some place that was like workable and interesting? Awesome. Okay, so set up that front leg. You might try to have that parallel to the bolster, front shin, dorsiflexed ankle to start with. And then start to turn the pelvis and that back thigh. Find what's workable. And then it might become obvious that you want to work here. You want to work with extending the spine. You feel really grounded through the legs. Right? Maybe you want to bring that front foot in a bit more, so you come down onto that thigh and you can get more kind of square through that back hip. And again, almost like the legs scissor together. Maybe that back thigh comes up, and a hand, whichever one, again, it's making sense for your brain and body today, reaches back. Might be the pinky toe side. It might be the big toe side. Okay, find what works for you. Take a couple of breaths there. All through that lens of like, what helps make space for you to move into space, into whatever shape is being expressed today. Okay, and then release that back leg, lower down over that front leg. Maybe you really ground down through the front of that back hip. That might make some space for you to get into that front hip a little bit differently. Okay, and then spin yourself so you're like in Malasana on that bolster. And then we're going to swing off of it. Okay, we are coming to, we've kind of moved through hip extension, spinal extension, and we're going to put it together in our peak pose and then come down with a couple of restorative poses and shavasana. This is where the chair comes in handy. Again, where I put my hands is just a suggestion. You're going to find a position, a rotation, a turning of the hands that works for you. Okay? And I'm going to show sort of like 3 different places we could stop along the way. So last thing we're going to do with the bolster with that hip extension is we're bringing, actually I'm going to use a block instead of a bolster. The firmer surface I think is going to work better for me. So block or bolster, I'm going for the block because the firmer surface I think is going to work better. I've got my one foot forward and my other foot behind me. But I'm going to hinge forward so I can bring the back foot up onto the edge of that chair. Could be the first MTP joint, could be the front of the ankle. And then I'm going to stand back up with that torso, reaching that knee down into the block. Okay, as I reach that knee down into the block, I want to let the sit bones and the tailbone kind of scoop towards the back of the thighs. And I'm just going to shift my chest and hips forward and back to the degree that that back quad, front of the thigh, front of the hip stuff is in agreement with. Okay. Now I could also add a reach of the arms up and back, and then a bit more of a hinge, a reach up and back of the hands, a press forward through those hips. Okay, I could reach back again to that foot with one hand or the other. And then we're going to come forward, bring both knees to the ground, take that foot off, and just come to tall kneeling for a second. And notice yourself side to side. And then based on your experience on that first side, you might reposition the prop or go for a pressed foam block instead of a firmer cork or wood block, etc., etc. Knee shouldn't be uncomfortable here. There's a spot for all of us on the knee that it likes pressure, so play with the prop placement. Other foot's going to come forward. We're going to hinge forward and bring the front of that ankle shin to the chair. Again, it could be, I'm too close if I do it, but it could be also the MTP joint is on the edge of that chair. So it's tricky to see with the blanket, but it's like my toes are like under the chair and the pads at the ball of my foot are on the chair. So could be this way for some of us. Could be the front of the ankle for others. Okay, again, create that reach down into the block with the knee, and then just take the hips, chest forward and back. Forward and back. Okay, you might add that reach up and back, almost like you're bending the fingers towards your thumbs, and then hinge out, and then scoop, and then hinge out. Again, maybe as you reach forward, a hand reaches back. Again, finding those places and spaces that it's like you've made space to move into the space, and there's something workable in the position you're in. Okay, take a couple of breaths, and then we're going to come out of that couch stretch, release that. So hips and things, spine, we're all ready. So I'm going to show you the 3 kind of iterations that you could come into here. Depending on your chair, so mine has these nice slanted arms that work really well. For me, if your chair isn't like a folding chair and it's a dining room chair, you might find that you put blocks on the seat of the chair, and that creates a platform for the hands. But here's where we're going. So I'm going to sit down. I've got my shoulder blades resting on the chair, okay? I would advise having the chair against a wall because then my brain knows it's not going anywhere, okay? And the reason is because now I'm going to use my legs to lift my hips up, and now I'm in this tabletop position. So I could work here, hold onto the chair, and kind of work some spinal extension here, lowering and lifting the hips. You could grab onto the chair. I might walk the feet more under and roll up onto the top of my head. My elbows are reaching towards the wall. Maybe I keep going and work up into full wheel and come out. So there's places for you to work the legs working, the hips in extension, while we find some spinal extension here. Okay, so again, maybe I'm here, I lift up, maybe I use the back or the side of the chair to then lower, and I'm working my legs, but I'm working some spinal extension. Maybe I stay lifted here, walk the feet up, and roll up to the top of the head. I'm thinking Elbows, like we did when we were on the ground, rotating towards the wall. Maybe I push through the arms and come all the way up. So there's places and spaces for all of us to find somewhere where we can work the position and the actions that we're trying to get. Okay? So take another minute or two to work with whatever. I know I'm like, it's very humid here right now too, Karen. I'm like, sweaty. To work with some iteration of that, okay? Some of us might find the hands here work, you know, maybe we're here and this is workable, is reaching the arms out and lowering the hips, using the edge of the chair. Maybe hands come behind the head, elbows reach to the ceiling, and again, this becomes really interesting where we can get a little more kind of extension through some upper segments of the spine. So there's lots of places where you could get that little work, stretch, space thing that has your brain kind of go, oh, that's cool. I like that sensation. I didn't know we could do that. Just take a couple breaths there, and then we're going to come out and move into a couple of 3 restorative poses before Shavasana. Any questions about that work we just did on the chair? Found something that was workable with the shoulder and stuff? Okay, awesome. Awesome. I love that one. It's just that kind of work is, I find, so much more useful than if I'm feeling kind of slumped and just going, sit up straight, be tall. Like that, there's no, it's not sustainable. I find like 2 minutes later, I'm like, sometimes it's because we legitimately are just tired and we need to just be as efficient as possible, which slouching is. And other times that can be helpful if I've been at the computer, but I'm like, I still have an hour of stuff I have to do. And it just sort of like, okay, it's like that coffee without having the coffee at 3 in the afternoon. Okay, so we're going to use, we're going to first do the active pose, and then we're going to set ourselves up into the restorative version. So the active pose we're going to do is fish, which uses all these same actions. So legs are going to reach out long, okay? The hands are by the side. We're literally going to push the elbows into the floor and lift up into spinal extension. The top back of the skull will rest on the ground. You could walk the hands in closer to the body or further from the body, but it's a reach down with the elbows, reach long through the legs, crown of the head, back kind of spot on the head, rests on the floor. So notice the arch of your back from like the pelvis to the top of the head, and then relax the elbows, lower yourself down. So that height of the arch is then what we're going to try to create for ourselves. We could use, could really simply use the bolster from here, and then I'm going to use the chair and a block there. And then I'm going to come down, rest on my elbows, and top of the head hits the bolster or the block. Stretch the legs out. So it's like my shoulder blades are on just kissing the bolster, top back of my head's kissing the bolster. I'm able to get a gentle kind of push down and towards my feet of the forearms, elbows. could be that I use 2 blocks and am even more kind of passive in it, where I've got the height of that block, I've got the other block long ways, and I come back on it. I just find sometimes the edges of these are a little aggressive sometimes. And again, you know, I still want to have some contact with forearms, elbows into the ground, and the legs out long. I like the softer bolster version better. Okay, so we're gonna be in this active, quasi-active variation of fish for another minute and a half. Okay, with your next exhale, you might release the head back onto the support, release the elbows, stand the feet up on the ground, roll to the side, come off that. Okay, and if you've got a blanket, if you position the blanket like so, I'm gonna pull up that side and then wrap the corners around the feet. Just gives it a little koozie for the feet. And then lay yourself back. I'm gonna put that bolster, keep that bolster underneath my thighs. Find where the arms want to be, might be beside you. They might want to rest on the pelvis or on the ribs. Maybe before the hands find a resting place, you bring them back to just cradle the occiput of the head, that ridge at the back of the head. I just create a little bit of traction with the follicles of the hair to get a sense of like lengthening through the back of the neck as the head comes to rest on the ground. And you could have your attention stay with your breath in and your breath out. Depending how active your mind is today, if it's a little stiller, maybe you let the attention soften and expand out a little further than the breath. attention back into the room and of my voice and of your body as it rests on the ground. Feel where there's pressure, maybe the sensation of numbness or tingling, coolness or heat. And start to gradually bring movement back to the body. Could be wiggling the fingers and toes, or spreading the fingers or toes, or reaching the arms or legs out long, or curling into a ball, maybe rocking a limb side to side. And as you bring movement back to the body, you'll make your way onto a side. Take a second there, just in the fetal position, and use your hand and your arm to press yourself up. Maybe the hands rest in your lap, or palms come together, thumbs just to the left of the breastbone in prayer position. Breathing in with a sense of gratitude and appreciation for this day, for this body, for this breath, and for choosing this time. Om Shanti Shanti Peace.